If you're taking the first steps in learning stop motion, you might not be ready to invest money in a professional camera or software like Dragon Frame. So you might be using just your cell phone and a stop motion app. If that's the case, I wanted to make this separate video to quickly show you how I would work if I only had a phone and an app. And I've suggested using an app called Stop Motion Studio. And there's the pro version that's only a few dollars, and it's going to give you a lot of control over your camera. So let's jump into that app and I'll show you exactly how I would use it. Okay, so I've launched Stop Motion Studio Pro. And the first thing you would do is go to New Movie. And your camera is going to connect. And you want to explore the settings in the bottom left here first. So let's check those out. We'll start from the beginning. And you can control your frame rate here. So right now it's set to 12 frames per second, but you can actually slide it to as high as 30 frames per second. Let's set it to 12. In this next menu are fades and dissolves, but we don't really need those. Aspect ratio, you can shoot vertically, widescreen, so you can use those for different social media platforms. In this next tab, these are just fun effects. We don't need any of those right now. And filter will be different color filters on your footage. So I would leave that at nothing. And then quality of your images. So you have standard, high def, all the way up to 4K. I would do 4K if available. You want the highest quality. And the next menu is going to be your playback. So you have short play on the left here, and that'll play a few frames, but I would leave that off for now. But remember that it's there. You can loop. I would loop. And don't include live and playback. You want to include live and playback because you want to see your most recent frame performing with the animation. And I don't see any need for adding a pause at the end, so I would have that off. And that's all the settings we have in here, so I would say done. And once that's all set, you would go to this camera icon in the top right, and that's gonna bring up the window for you to shoot the animation. And here in the bottom right, you have your camera settings. So let's go to those and run through all of these. So first you wanna do camera, and you can do rear or front. So right now we have it on the rear camera, obviously. And the next tab, you want to set this to manual. And that's going to allow you to control all your camera settings. So the next tab, you can then control your white balance. You can see some are more orange, some are more blue. So that's just a personal preference. You want something that's pretty close to white. So this sunrise one is pretty nice for the lights that I'm using. The next tab, we have focus. And if I put my hand here, you can see that you can bring the focus right up front, or you can bring it back here. But it's great that you have control of this. So of course you would set the focus to the object you're animating. And next tab, you have your ISO. And I would have this as low as possible. So somewhere between 50 and 200. And what that does is it limits the amount of light coming in. So at a 50, then when you go to your shutter speed, you can do a longer shutter. So something like 1/60th, 1/40th. I would try to stay away from these shorter shutter speeds of 1/1000th because you'll get light flicker. So the longer the shutter speed, the less flicker you'll get. Yeah, looks good, about at 1/100th. And the zoom, just in case you need it, but I would leave it completely zoomed out right now. And rotate in case you want to flip your screen vertically or horizontally, but we'll have that off. And done. So those are all the settings I would touch. Let's capture a few frames of animation just to see the workflow with this app. So we'll capture the first frame, being very careful not to bump our camera. and then we'll move it over. And to review our animation in this app, I would just gently touch this playback button over and over. Looking good, capture another frame. So you're going to rely on tapping this playback to see your animation. Looking good, capture. Capture. So you can see how you don't have the full control of toggling animation back and forth. All you can do is play it back. An alternate way of reviewing this animation would be to go back to this screen and to scrub through your animation manually. But that's a bit tedious, so that's the workflow of using a phone and Stop Motion Studio Pro. You're gonna review the settings, adjust them, make sure they're set. You're gonna capture frames, and to review, I would just gently tap play over and over. There's a second way you can use Stop Motion Studio Pro with your phone and the addition of a computer or a laptop. And that is to download the Stop Motion Studio remote camera app on your phone and then the Stop Motion Studio Pro software on your computer. So you're gonna launch the remote camera app on your phone, and it's going to bring up this configuration number, which is the URL down here. And then you're going to launch Stop Motion Studio Pro on your laptop or computer. And this is the window that pops up. And from here, you're going to say New Movie. And in the bottom center here, there's a camera icon. When you click that, you want to make sure, so if I say None and then go back to Remote Camera, there's a Configure button. And when you click that, you're going to type in that number that appears on your phone screen. And you say Connect. And that's going to bring up the camera app connected to your computer, and you're going to see the live feed from your phone in the software on your computer. And that's going to establish a live feed between your phone's camera and your laptop. So now I can animate here without touching my phone, so I don't have to disturb it while I'm animating. Now, there are some limitations in this setup. It's nicer in that you can review your animation on your computer, but when I go into the camera settings down here in the left, all it gives me is frame rate, so I can change that to 12. It has some effects here, aspect ratio, foreground effects. You can add a filter, you can select the quality. I would do 4K. And it has playback options. What you'll notice that it's lacking is camera settings. So unfortunately, with this setup, your camera settings can't be communicated to your computer. So you can't lock focus, you can't control white balance, and you can't control ISO or shutter speed, which is not great. So if you have an object moving in the depth of the camera, it's going to auto adjust focus. So let's take a look at that. So you can see as I move my hand back and forward, the lens is auto adjusting. So if I take a picture of my hand back here, capture frame, capture frame, and then when I toggle between the two, you can see that background, how much the focus is changing, and also the exposure. So the image is getting brighter. So if you're using this setup, you are going to experience a lot more flicker and camera change between frames, which is fine if you're just learning, but you aren't going to be able to export very professional looking footage. Now, if I were animating in this setup, I would take a frame, move the object, and then I could toggle with my arrows. So it does have great toggling and reviewing capabilities, but again, it's very limited in terms of camera. So it's really up to you if you are using a phone and Stop Motion Studio Pro, which route you want to take, the phone only or the phone and the computer. It depends on your goals for what you want to learn. If I were more focused on learning the principles of animation, I would maybe use the laptop version because you have the toggling capabilities, and that's going to teach you a lot more about animation than playing back continuously on your phone. But if you want to export more professional looking work, I would use the phone only option because that's going to give you control over your camera settings. Hopefully that helps if you are using Stop Motion Studio Pro. My official review is that it's a great option if you're learning the first few steps of stop motion animation and just want to see if you enjoy the process before making an expensive investment in equipment. But just know that there are limitations and you're not going to get quite that full experience of toggling and reviewing your animation and exporting professional looking work.